Hey, I'm Lee Waller, and welcome to Motion Media Design in After Effects. Today I want to take a look at recreating this radar element here for, you can use it in different types of HUD designs. So let's jump in and take a look at how we can recreate this. All right, I want to start a new composition. New composition, 1920, 1080. 10 seconds will do great on this. I'm going to hit OK. The first thing we need to do is create a background layer. To do that, I'm going to use shape layers. I'm going to go up here to the rectangle tool, click and hold on that, and get the ellipse tool. And then I'm just going to double click in there. I have this ellipse and I'm going to make some adjustments to it. So down here in the timeline, you'll see that we have the contents for shape layer 1, which is ellipse 1. We're going to open that up and go to the ellipse path. The size there right now is 1920 by 1080. We want to reduce that down. So I'm going to deconstrain the X and Y size here, and I'm going to drop these down to 1100 by 700. I'm going to change the fill color on this, and right here, going to jump into fill, click on this color swatch right here, and I'm going to use the hexadecimal. What I have is 020 A10. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to apply an effect, and that's going to be fractal noise. So I'm just going to close up the contents here, select my shape layer, and then come up here to Effect, and we're going to go to Noise and Grain, and we're going to drop that fractal noise on there. You'll see here in our effects palette, we have all of the properties for fractal noise. We're going to make some adjustments to that. First thing we want to do is we want to click here on Basic, and let's go to Rocky. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to change the noise type from soft linear to spline. And then we're going to adjust the contrast from 100% down to 28%. And we're going to leave the brightness at 0. And then we'll come down and drop the opacity to 70%. And then let's change the blend mode to multiply. So I'm going to label this layer here so I can keep up with what I have. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to hit the return key and label this background. I'm going to close up those properties, and after we've added fractal noise, we want to add one more effect to this, and that is grid. So again, make sure that our background layer is selected. Let's go up to Effect, Generate, Grid. Now at first, obviously, this is not what we want, so we're going to make an adjustment to this. Let's come down here to Blending Mode and select Overlay. And now what we want to do is adjust the frequency of our lines here, and to do that, we're going to go to the Size From option here, click on that, and let's go to Width slider, and it'll drop to 32. You can adjust that some more or less, whatever you prefer on that, but for right now, I'm just going to leave it at 32. And that has our background layer finished up. The next thing we want to do, as you can see here in the example, is the radar sweep. Let's go create that. To do that, let's duplicate the background, select it, Control D or Command D. And what we need to do is delete both of our effects that we've applied to it, and we want to relabel this. So select the layer and hit the Enter key, and let's relabel this radar sweep. We're going to need to make a few adjustments to this. So let's first change the fill type of this shape layer. To do that, make sure that the shape layer is selected, and then we'll come up here to the top where it says Fill, click on that, and we want to change it from a solid color to a radial gradient. Click on that, hit OK. You'll see that that has changed, and also that our properties for that gradient fill have opened up down here in the timeline. We do need to make some adjustments to this. So let's go into Colors, and we want to edit that gradient. This first color stop right here to the left, I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to type in the color that I've used. That'll be 1D4 A30. And I can now go down to that hexadecimal, copy that, Control C, and let's go over to the right color stop and paste that number in there also. And now for our two opacity stops above the two color stops, let's select those and set those at 50%. When we're done with that, you can hit OK. And we are finished with that layer. Now what we want to do to continue creating the animation part of this is let's duplicate the radar sweep, select it, Control D or Command D. So select that layer, let's relabel it to radar sweep matte. And we're going to add a layer style to this radar sweep matte to create the animation that we want. So we're going to select that layer, right click on it, go to layer styles, and then let's add gradient overlay. And you'll see now down here in the timeline that we have the layer styles added, and here is our gradient overlay. We're going to open that up, and we're going to make a few adjustments here. We first want to change the style of this from linear to angle, and then let's just check what the gradient actually looks like. We want to make sure that it is white on our first color stop, black on our second color stop, and then both of our opacities are at 100%. Hit OK on that. And now to animate this, let's make sure that our timeline indicator is at the very beginning of the timeline. We want to animate the angle of this. So I'm going to set my first keyframe right there, clicking the stopwatch, and I'm going to change that from 90 degrees to 0 degrees. So 0x by 0.0 degrees on our first keyframe right there. And I'm going to jump to the end of the composition, and now I'm going to click on the 0x there and type in 5 to have After Effects animate this 5 full rotations in this 10 seconds. We can jump back to the beginning of the composition, let that play out a little bit. You can see that that is animating now. We're going to use this radar sweep and the white and the black areas of this to create transparency on our radar sweep. To do that, we're going to use a track matte method here. So under this column track matte right here, and if you don't have this column right here, you might need to hit toggle switches and modes right there. If you have the switches, then just come down here, click toggle switches and modes, and now you should have the modes. And this is our track matte column. So on radar sweep right there, we want to come over underneath track matte, click on none, and we want to use the Luma information from the radar sweep matte. Click on that, and now you'll see that we're creating transparency on top of our background with these two layers. We can go back to the beginning of the composition, let that play out a little bit. All right, that's looking good. So to create our border, let's select the background and duplicate it. Control D. We have background 2 now. Let's drag that up to the top of the stack here and relabel that. Hit the Enter key and type in border. And let's delete the effects from this, fractal noise and grid. And now we're going to jump into the contents of it and make a few adjustments here. We want to go to ellipse path. And we're going to change the size of this to 1090 and tab over to 690. And we're good on that. And I'm just going to close this up, and I need to duplicate ellipse 1. I'm going to select ellipse 1 right here, and I'm going to use Control D or Command D. And now we have ellipse 1 on bottom, ellipse 2 on top. And let's go make an adjustment to ellipse 2 now. Go into the path for that. And let's increase the size of that to 1280 by 710. Even though you can't see it, we have two different shapes sitting on top of each other. Ellipse 2 is on top of ellipse 1. Ellipse 2 is a little bit larger than ellipse 1. We're going to use a modifier to cut ellipse 1 from ellipse 2 to create the open space that we need here. To do that, let's go to Contents. You can see the word Add right here. Click on the arrow to the right. And we're going to go to Merge Paths. That drops Merge Paths right under ellipse 1. That's where we want it. We're going to go into the properties for Merge Paths, and you'll see that the mode right now is Add. Let's select that mode and go to Subtract. And like I said, what has happened now is we've subtracted shape ellipse 1 from shape ellipse 2, and we have this hole here now, and that creates our border. I'm going to just close all of that up, select my border, and I want to add a drop shadow in here just to kind of create some definition and some depth in the design. So with border selected, going to go up to Effect, Perspective, Drop Shadow. You'll see over here in our Effects Control panel that we have drop shadow here. I'm going to increase the opacity of that up to 100%. And the distance, I'm going to drop it to 0. And then I'm going to soften this up by about 80 pixels there. We'll go back to the original composition, and you'll see now the object that we're tracking. We're going to create that now. We're going to call it our bogey. So we're going to use a similar method for our bogey as we used on our radar sweep here. We'll first create our bogey. To do that, I'm just going to come up here and make sure that the ellipse tool is selected, and then just double click. We're going to make a few changes to this. Let's go to the word fill and select none, and then hit OK. And let's go to our stroke and let's select solid color there. Hit OK on that. And for this, I'm going to change the color to white and hit OK. And of course, this is much larger than we need it, so we're going to make adjustments to the size. Let's drop down into our contents, ellipse 1, go to the ellipse path here, and open that up, and let's change the size, deconstrain those two proportions there, and let's change the size down to 16 pixels each. And we might want to adjust the pixel width, maybe down to 3 or 2, just depending on what you want there. And there is our object that we're going to track. We can go ahead and animate that. I'm going to select that layer and hit P on the keyboard for position. And I'm going to just scrub this off to the side a little bit. I'm holding down the Shift key as I scrub that number. Bring it up a little bit, just set it off right in there. Make sure that my timeline indicator is at the beginning of the timeline. Set my first keyframe, click on the stopwatch right there for position. Wherever you want that to end, I'll just go to about 8.5 seconds in to get that all the way across. And then I'm just going to scrub those numbers across and down till I get it to the other side, wherever you want that to end. And now you can see that move across. Now, of course, it's not having the effect that we want, because what we need to do is we need to create a track matte for this. And before we move on, let's relabel shape layer 1 right there to bogey, B-O-A-G-I-E. And let's drag that underneath the border. It does disappear behind the border, but we still don't quite have the look that we're going for as this radar sweeps around. So what we're going to do is use the radar sweep matte for our bogey also. Let's duplicate it. So select it, Control D, Command D. Let's drag it up above the layer bogey right there. And let's relabel that. Bogey matte. Hit OK. And we need to tell the bogey now, this layer here, to use the bogey matte as a track matte. We'll do it just like we did the radar sweep. Come over here to track matte on that layer bogey. Go down to Luma, select it. And now you'll see that it responds to the opacity of that sweep. I hope this is helpful. Thanks for watching. For more in-depth look at motion media design with After Effects, check out my other tutorials.